In Algebra 1, Section 8.6, we're dealing with solving quadratic equations by factoring. So this kind of brings what you learned in the first half of Chapter 8, but now we're going to combine it with the last section. We're going to start solving. So not only are we going to put them in bubbles, but then we're going to solve. And if you remember, when we're solving, it means we're trying to find the x-intercepts of our parabola. Okay, because the graph of a quadratic equation, the ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, it's a U-shaped parabola. So where it touches those x's, those are the solutions. So that's what we're looking for. And because it's a U-shaped, it usually touches 2. It could touch none if it's above or below the x-axis, or it could just touch right at the vertex. So most commonly, we have 2 answers. So the first one, they've already factored it for us. So it's already in the, instead of giving us this in the factor form. So the thing is, when we multiply the bubble, if one bubble equals 0, the whole thing equals 0. So if I get this to equal 0, then this whole thing will equal 0. If I get this equals 0, so my 2 answers are x minus 7 equals 0, and x plus 2 equals 0. And I solve for both. I'm going to add 7 to both sides. Gives me x equals 7. And then minus 2 on both sides, x equals negative 2. So my 2 answers are 7 and negative 2. Okay? Because if I put 7 in here, this will be 0. This won't be 0, but 0 times this will give me 0. And vice versa. All right? Number 2. It's similar to this, but this one doesn't have a plus or minus. That's okay, that makes it even easier. That just means I have the same thing. X minus 2 equals 0, and x equals 0. Well, I already have one answer, x equals 0. And I add 2 to both sides. I end up with x equals 2. So my answer is 2 and 0. And again, if I was going to review this, this basically means that if I were to graph this graph, the u would hit at 0 and positive 2. Right here. Okay, that's what this means, the solution. And this would hit at 7 and negative 2. All right, the next one is the most common one you're going to be seeing in the book, because it's not going to get you, you're not going to get it nicely wrapped in the 2 parentheses. You have to put them. So this one is pretty simple because it doesn't have a thing in front, a value in front of the x squared. It's actually a 1. So what that means is I do the first type of factoring. I believe it's either 8.2 or 8.3 in your book. So then what that means is I have to find 2 numbers that go here. I don't have to put anything in front of the x because there's nothing in front of there. But I have 2 numbers that when I multiply together, it gives me 8. But when I add together, it gets me a negative 6. Okay? So 2 numbers. So I'm going to take 8 and I'm going to factor it. 4 and 2 give me positive 6. 8 and 1 give me 9. That's out. I need a negative 6. So if I do negative 4 and negative 2, if I multiply them together, the negatives will cancel out to still give me a positive. But if I add them together, it gives me a positive, as a negative 6. So my answer is negative 2, negative 4. And be sure to check it. All right? Multiply back out, so make sure you get that. And then from here, it's just what we do for number 1. I'm going to do this bubble equals 0, and this bubble equals 0. And those are my 2 answers. So I add 2 on both sides to get x equals 2 here. And then I add 4 on both sides, I x equals 4. So that means if I plug 2 in for here, and this is how I can check. If I plug 2 in, I should get 0. If I plug 4 in, it also should give me 0. All right? The next one looks similar to number 3, except it's not equal to 0. It's very important that when I apply these steps, that it's equal to 0. Okay? I'm going to put a line here so you know that this goes for number 3. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do first and foremost is I'm going to make everything equal to 0. And I can do that by getting rid of everything on one of the sides. So I'm going to get rid of 21. By subtracting 21 on both sides, I end up with x squared plus 4x minus 21 equals 0. From there, I just apply everything that I learned there. I'm going to have 2 bubbles. There's no number in front of my x squared, which means I don't have to put a number in front of my x's. And I'm going to factor negative 21. Two numbers, when multiplied together, gets me the last number, which is negative 21. But when added together, gets me the middle number, which is positive 4. So, let me think. Negative 21, we have negative 3 and 7, which gives us a positive 4. Perfect. Negative 3, positive 7. That's not my answer yet, okay? I have to make each bubble solve for 0. So I add 3 to both sides. X gives me 3. I minus 7. X equals negative 7. So those are my two answers. Number 5 has another step added before. First, I'm going to make everything equal to 0. That's always my first step. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to add 2x squared to both sides. It's better to do the side, like I can move all this stuff over here, but then my front, the number in front of here is going to be negative, which makes it a little bit more complicated when you're trying to test things out. So it would just be easier if you just try to make this positive. So, and it doesn't matter which side the 0 is on. So then I end up, this cancels out, I end up with 2x squared plus 20x plus 50. Now before I do my bubbles, which you remember in the previous test, you have to take out what they have in common, because if there's a number in front of here, try to see if you can take out anything in common from all three of them. Well, since all of these are divisible by 2, I can take out a 2 from each one. So this is still equals 0. But if I take out a 2 from here, I end up with x squared. If I take, not subtract, but take out, which means I divide, this gives me a 10x, and this gives me a 25, right? So now, if I keep this 2 here, now what I'm going to do is I can divide both sides by 2. That cancels this out. And 0 over 2 is still 0. So that means I'll end up with x2 plus 10x plus 25. And this problem looks very similar to this one, and even similar to that one too. So that means from here, I just have my two bubbles. And now, there's nothing in front of my x, so I don't have to do guess and check. And two numbers, when multiplied together, gets me the last number, which is 25. But when added together, it gets me the middle number, which is positive 10. So let's positive 5 and positive 5. So that means this one actually has only one solution, because since they're the same, I just have to do x plus 5 equals 0, which gives me x equals negative 5. So what that means is when it's on the graph, at negative 5 is the vertex. That's what that means, right? You don't have to worry about writing that. Okay, so go ahead and write this down, and try page 565, numbers 6, 12, and 18. 565, numbers 6, 12, and 18. I will see you in class.